Welcome to this Facebook Live special where we take a deep look at issues surrounding COVID-19. My name is Maya Hayakawa. 2020 has been a roller coaster, to say the least. It all started rosy, and then the pandemic hit, and all the plans we had went out the window. As the year ends and we reflect on the year that was, I wonder what 2021 has in store for us. Should we bother planning for yet another unpredictable year? Before scrapping any plans, let me just say I'm glad you're watching, whether it's from your laptop, phone, or whatever electronic device. Also a shout out to those who may be joining us from our partners, Capital FM in Kenya, Times Television and Capital FM in Malawi, NBS Television in Uganda, Bush Radio in South Africa, Splash FM in Nigeria, YFM in Ghana, QTV in Gambia, and Sky Communications in Liberia. The question we are asking today is this: how are you planning for 2021 amid the pandemic? Simple question. Do share your thoughts, experiences, and even questions about planning for 2021 via the comment section below, and we will definitely sample them throughout the program. Now, as usual, I'm not tackling this discussion alone. We have our guests who will be with us throughout the show, so keep your questions and comments coming. Joining us from Lagos, we have Taiwo Oyedele from a fiscal policy partner and West Africa tax leader at PwC. He is also the chairman of PwC West Africa COVID-19 Intervention Committee, which has been supporting businesses and policymakers in their economic responses to the pandemic. And also joining us from Gaborone is Wabo Moswate, a seasoned banker and an advocate for financial literacy with special focus on business and personal finance. Also joining us from Nairobi is Mucha Milingo, an emotional intelligence expert who is passionate about empowering people to take ownership of a positive future. A warm welcome to you all. I'm looking forward to this important discussion. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed everything from how we socialize, work, and even how we seek healthcare. While the world is hopeful over the new developments of the vaccine candidates, and with the latest news that Pfizer's candidate will roll out mass production as early as next week in the UK, chances are that we still will be dealing with the pandemic in 2021. Basically, 2021 is quite unpredictable, making it tricky to plan for. As Ruth Kilingu put it on Twitter, she says, "Where is the 2021 fine print? I like to plan early." I love this tweet because, girl, if I could get a fine print of what 2021 would look like, then, you know, it would make it so much easier for me to plan for the year. So for businesses in particular, it's not easy to plan. Let's listen to one Nigerian British entrepreneur on how he's planning for his business for 2021.
One of the things that we've seen during COVID is a decline in the retail sector. Obviously, due to COVID, people are staying at home and not able to shop the retail space. However, that said, there's been a massive increase online. A lot of brands have decided that whilst retail is dead, to go online and start providing their services across e-commerce platform, not just only across Africa, but also in Europe, in China, etc., etc. Brands are having to rethink their strategy on how to reach consumers. One of the things that Lux Africa has done has been able to target the African market by creating what we consider to be the first African luxury boutique site where you can purchase luxury goods and have it delivered to all 54 countries across Africa. At Lux Africa, we've created a unique position to offer all our clients across Africa an opportunity to be able to buy at the comfort of their homes any luxury brands they wish.
All right, a comment over here from Maya Miko, who says there's a lot of things that we can learn from, but just to mention a few. First of all, we need to change our mindset that is being innovative. We may start producing things like masks and sell them. I'll tell you one thing is for sure, this 2020 did not go according to plan. So let me begin with you, Mucha. When we think about 2021, is it even worth planning for based on what went down in 2020?
Thank you so much. Really delighted to be contributing to this conversation. Yes, we do need to plan, but we need to plan differently. We need to plan considering the fact that not all variables are clear. If we don't take stock of 2020 and the impact 2020 has had on us, we run the risk of carrying baggage forward into 2021. So my advice is, as we start planning for 2021, the first step is to actually look at 2020 and the impact that it had. Now, typically, we'll look at the impact in terms of our finances, the impact in terms of our business. I'm talking about the impact in terms of your emotions. How are you emotionally? How are you mentally? Because if we don't deal with the baggage, if we don't deal with the issues that we've had to face, the changes that we've had to make that we've not quite come to terms with, then we are going to struggle as we move into the new year.
Mucha, I love the point that you brought out, which is assessing the impact that 2020 has had on us this year. Speaking of which, Taiwo, at the beginning of the year, we were really working with projections based on, the early stages of the pandemic as far as the economic impact that the pandemic has on the continent. Now that we are at the end of the year, do we have a comprehensive picture as far as the economic damage the pandemic has had on the continent?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm also glad to be contributing to this very interesting conversation today. The idea is that nobody saw COVID-19 coming, and there was no scenario by anyone, whether it's a company, whether it's a business, individual, or even government, to deal with what we eventually had to put up with in 2020. 2020 has not ended, but we are now beginning to see the extent of the impact of COVID-19 on us. I do think that Africa has been relatively lucky, luckier than other continents in terms of the number of infections and number of deaths. But economically, we haven't been as lucky. I think, in fact, that the impact of the pandemic already landed in Africa in terms of the economic impact before the virus itself arrived on the continent. And this is not difficult to understand because many African countries rely on commodities, natural resources. And as soon as you had lockdowns in Europe, in the US, and the rest of the world, demand for those products declined and then impacted prices. So which meant that foreign receipts, government revenue, and the rest of it suffered. So we've now seen decline in GDP of about 16% in South Africa to 6% in Nigeria, and Kenya holding it flat. But, it's always good to put these things into perspective. When you have a decline in GDP, it actually means more people getting into poverty in Africa, many people being hungry. And if you think about the SDG, it means that more poverty, more hunger, less healthcare, less education, and more inequality.
Right. Some more comments coming over here. Patrick, you say, could we just do away with the whole resolution and prediction for the next year until the pandemic is over, since it's continuing into 2021? Also, Martin, you say 2020 has taught us to manage our expectations. This is my take home for 2021. Absolutely. I love that because I can relate to that. Definitely, it's about managing your expectations so that if you don't meet them, then, you're not blown as hard. So this question for you, Wabo, I'm telling you, 2020, we've seen a number of job losses. We've seen people having to deal with the pressures on their finances with job cuts and also, salary cuts as well. I guess the question on many people's minds as they walk into 2021 is, how can I make more money? What advice would you have on this?
Thank you, Maya, for having me today. It's quite a privilege and an honor. So for me, I would say, let's start first with individuals. When you look at individuals, historically, most people have had a mindset of consuming. We've always been consumers. We get a nice job, single income, we buy a nice car, we buy a nice house, and that's it. We now need to shift mindsets to being more of producers or producer mindset. So what has happened now has shown us that we need multiple streams of income. So if you're an individual, you can look at things like investing in things like real estate, maybe starting a small business on the side that can generate you a bit of revenue. And another thing that has come up is that COVID has really changed has changed everything. So from an African context, you find that historically most businesses that we had, it was normal retail stores, it was normal filling stations and things like that. With COVID now, we're seeing more opportunities in the renewable energy space. People can participate there. We're seeing more opportunities in the e-commerce. So e-commerce is one area that people can really do good at. I'll just bring it to the context of Botswana. We import almost everything. We don't even produce things like pens. So a lot of entrepreneurs have an opportunity of also manufacturing, coming up with goods that are generated locally.
A comment over here from Watch, who says 2020 has been the waste of a year of all the 36 years I have lived on Earth. I can really feel that, because a lot of people who had all these plans coming along and have worked towards them for years have found all that progress go down the drain. So Mucha, for people who are looking to restart, reset, rebuild their lives, perhaps, starting from level 0, what advice would you have for them?
I think the first thing is we really need to have a mindset shift. And one of the advice I would give is to look for the opportunity that exists. Do you know that even in this year that some are calling a waste, there are businesses that are thriving. There are individuals who've set up new businesses. There are individuals who've gotten jobs. And so I think the first thing as we're rebuilding is to really have the kind of mindset that says, what are the opportunities? I really like the comment about how as Africans, we are very much consumers. COVID should teach us that there are opportunities and we really need to pay attention to them. The opportunities that lie as far as, e-commerce is concerned, the opportunities that lie as far as manufacturing is concerned. So I think the first thing is a mind shift that says, let me not, go back to this idea that as an individual, my role in life is to get a good job and then work in that organization for the rest of my life. We need a shift. We need to accept that the world is no longer operating as it did. And as was earlier said, we need to look at what kind of multiple revenue streams can we have. And you can start wherever you are. You can start with whatever little you have. So I think the focus is looking at what opportunities exist. And here's the thing, Maya, if we're not paying attention to our emotions, and I'll come back to that, what will happen is we make decisions in our mind, but our emotions drive our behavior. And so if you're not paying attention to how your emotions are interacting with some of those decisions you're making, you're moving forward in your head, but your heart is pulling you backwards. And so you're in that constant state of back and forward, back and forward. And so again, as we're starting from that ground zero, the question is, what baggage do I have as a result of 2020? How can I address that baggage? Where did things go wrong for me? How can I deal with that so that I move forward into this clean slate without taking any baggage forward? But I think the key is to really shift our mindset and take an optimistic approach and remind ourselves that opportunities exist. And we just have to find those opportunities to rebuild. And it is possible.
I love that. I love how you said, really, right now is an opportunity for us to reset and as we bring this year to a close, and to really reflect on how we can shift our mindset as we're ready for 2021. Bafayu, you say the pandemic has had great effects on Africa, more people being forced to poverty. And even on this point, COVID-19 could push up to 40 million people into extreme poverty in Africa this year alone. Now, the BBC's Charles Kitonga had a conversation with Albert Zufak, the World Bank chief economist for the African region, and started by asking him what high levels of poverty mean for the African economy. Take a look.
What we define as extreme poverty is basically people living under $1.9 per day. And that's actually not enough to put food on the table for a family. That's extremely bad. And the only reason why we are very, very much alarmed by this increase in poverty is because it's a different category of people who are being pushed into poverty, Charles. What is happening is that the increase in poverty is essentially coming from urban dwellers, those in the informal sector, those in self-employment who were forced because of COVID to actually stay home while their the income earning activities require a lot of interactions with people.
Are there countries that are seeing a sharper rise in terms of poverty levels across the continent in comparison to others?
We are seeing in countries like Ethiopia, Malawi, Nigeria, and Uganda, we are clearly seeing the devastating impact of COVID-19 on urban poverty. And in Nigeria, for example, by June 2020, 45% have certainly stopped just going to work, compared to 17% in Uganda, 8% in Ethiopia, 6% in Malawi.
What kind of policies should African governments be looking at?
It's going to be important for our governments to implement policies that can really lead to job creation in our countries, productive job creation. Creating jobs would require 3 sets of policies. The first is to really leverage the importance of the digital transformation. The digital economy has clearly emerged from this COVID crisis as a silver lining. The second set of policy, Charles, is going to be about really adding value to our export, leveraging, for example, the Continental Free Trade Agreement to strengthen, trade, but most importantly, investment links within the Africa region. And the third set of policies is going to be about, raising productivity in agriculture by better linking our rural and urban areas and investing in our cities.
We're glad you're watching, and if you just tuned in today, we're discussing plans for 2021, and the specific question we're asking you today is how you're going about planning for 2021 amid the pandemic. Some comments over here. Lazarus, you say, though it has been so destructive, it has also enabled people to venture into technology, hence facilitating business more easily across the globe. And George, you say, unfortunately, the pandemic has been used as an excuse for plunder in Africa. Donated money has found itself in politicians' pockets. Remember to tell us where you're watching us from. Mohammed, you say those who plan to open businesses in 2021 are likely to succeed because they can get most of the things cheaper, since most of the people are discouraged and afraid to invest. The emojis on this comment is really something else. 2021 is an opportunity for those with courage. And Josh, you say, my best year in business in 4 years. That's great news. Congratulations to you. And Cliff, you say 2020 has taught us a great lesson, especially us Africans, to be more producers than consumers. So Taiwo, listening to some of these comments, it seems that some people have actually managed to pivot really well in 2020 and actually had the best years in business. From where you sit, what is your assessment as far as how businesses have managed to pivot in 2020? And what are some of those lessons that we can bring forward to 2021?
Yeah, indeed. I think the pandemic has not affected everyone equally, as you would expect. So there have been some sectors that have done even better during the pandemic than before the pandemic. We also have individuals and small businesses and large firms that were very innovative and very agile in quickly responding to the impact of the pandemic, and therefore they have at least the financial gains, even though nobody is happy about the health aspects and the fatality. So I think, for Africa, it was different in the sense that we have larger percentage of our economies being accounted for by the informal sector. You practically have people who live from hand to mouth. And when you have a lockdown without the social safety net, you have more people dying from hunger and other diseases. For example, the number of people who died from malaria in Africa in 1 month is more than the entire fatality from COVID in the entire 1 year of 2020. So, but then we see that innovation, particularly adoption of technology, has been a game changer for almost everyone. And those who are able to adapt very quickly have been able to at least, keep their heads above waters. I think we have to always think about our SME, particularly because they don't have the right level of support. What then happened was many of them had to spend their capital. It's almost like you have no fruits to eat, you ate the seeds. So the question is, are they going to ever come back? Maybe for many of them, the answer would be no, unless government is deliberate in trying to help them to be able to come back.
Wabo, if there is anything that I have learned this year is the importance of savings and managing my financial status. But we also heard from the World Bank chief economist on the staggering levels of poverty in Africa. So how does one go about planning financially and even begin, setting financial goals in such uncertain times for 2021?
Thank you for that. So for me, you find that everything worth pursuing, you need to have goals. I know every year we sit down, we write our goals for the next year, but do we have financial goals? So that's the first point. You need to set financial goals. Financial goals can be things like, I want to get out of debt completely. I want multiple streams of income. I want to retire early. When you have goals, now you have something to aim at. Now, when you have that something to aim at, you need to start budgeting. It was mentioned earlier that from as little as you have, there's an ability to save something on the side. So when you have that budget, your main focus should be creating a surplus every month. I know that there are a lot of things that we spend money on that we don't need. So let's cut on that. Let's aim to have a surplus. You save it away. As you save money away, take a bit of that money, risk it, start something. Start a small little business that can generate you revenue. Let's not just have money sitting in savings and being eaten up by inflation annually. But the most important thing for me is we need to be clear about where we want to go financially. If you don't have that, you're going to spend the whole year without any focus.
Mm-hmm. Mucha, you've spoken a lot about the importance in actually assessing how it is that we're feeling and how that is impacting our business decisions, our personal decisions, how we're socializing, how we're even coping with the pandemic. As we think about where we want to head to for 2021, what is the advice you would have about incorporating our emotional status in planning for that?
We've typically ignored the way that we feel. We don't think it's relevant. We consider ourselves to be very rational beings. But what our research shows is that emotions drive behavior. We make decisions very much driven by our emotions. And so I think as you're looking ahead, where to start is in taking stock. Just ask yourself, how has 2020 been? And be comfortable with the discomfort of digging deeper beneath the surface. It's not comfortable to really dig beneath the surface to understand how we're feeling about the impact that the pandemic has had. So think about your finances. What impact has the pandemic had on your finances? How has that impacted you emotionally? Think about your health. How has the pandemic impacted your health? How has the pandemic impacted your relationship? So look at every facet of your life. Typically, when we set goals at the beginning of every year, we set goals in different spheres of our lives. So for every one of those spheres, take stock and ask yourself how the pandemic has potentially ravaged that area of your life. And then ask yourself the lessons you can learn from that. I think one of the things that's come out very clearly is that we do tend to be wasteful. When we have a little extra, we tend to be wasteful. We want to spend it. So maybe one of the lessons learned from 2020 is how important it is to have that safety net, to have that extra income, that extra money that we have somewhere else. And so when we begin to kind of unravel how we have been impacted emotionally, it helps us to then make decisions that are better decisions for us in the new year. If we make decisions without contemplating how we have been impacted, because Maya, we've been impacted.
Yeah.
This pandemic something that we most likely will never see in our lifetimes. And it has ravaged very many of us. And so we need to take stock and assess. I would encourage every individual to just, as you're thinking about setting goals, and I do think you should set goals for 2021. Yes, it is unknown, but you see, the problem is if you don't set any goals, you'll end up nowhere. At least if you set some goals, you will end up somewhere. Yeah. So as you're setting those goals, ask yourself, how has 2020 treated me in this particular area? How am I feeling about it? What can I learn from that experience? Mm-hmm. What changes can I make? And then you're in a better position to actually make determinations about the future.
I really like what you said about COVID really pushing us into outside of our comfort zones, and that in many ways has challenged us to be better in very many aspects. Taiwo, a question as far as 2021 is concerned, in line of all of the new developments that have come out with the vaccines, does this offer any glimmer of hope for Africa and its economy?
Yes, the answer is yes, to some extent. I think maybe the good news for me is that as much as we all know that 2021 will be uncertain, I think it will be less uncertain than 2020. At least we know there will still be COVID. Right. We can plan for a number of scenarios in 2021 than in 2020. Now, finding a vaccine is good news for the whole world, even though in terms of fatality and whether we'll get the vaccines on time in Africa, it's a big question mark. But I think in terms of the economic impact, Africa should actually be more concerned about what happens to the rest of the world than in Africa. If economic activities pick up in Europe, in the US, the rest of Asia, then demand for commodities and everything else will go up. And that way we can start growing our economies and having inclusive development for our people to come out of poverty. So maybe it's too early in the day to start celebrating the vaccines. But I think for 2021, we have now more data, more options, more scenarios that we can plan for. And that cuts across individuals, businesses, and also governments. If you consider the fact that the population growth rate in Africa is around 3%. It means that when you're not growing at more than 3%, you're pushing more people into poverty, and we just can't afford that.
Right. I have about 2 minutes left. Before we go, Wabo, I'm really curious to know, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned out of 2020 that you will carry with you to 2021?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So for me, what I've learned is that the world as you know it is evolving all the time. The future is uncertain, so we always need to plan for a worst case scenario. We always need to continue reinventing ourselves, be more innovative.
If there's one thing that is constant, it's actually change, right? Mucha, how about for you? The one lesson you'll take with you?
I think the lesson I will take is that we need to be able to adapt to change. Change is, as you said, the one thing we know is for certain. So how agile are we? I think 2020 has taught me the importance of agility, being able to move forward. And one of the lessons that is so clear to me is that we need to focus on progress, not perfection. Let's focus on moving forward. Let's not wait until everything is aligned, but let's take steps forward. And what happens is each tiny step you take forward is progress. And when you look back, you'll be amazed at how you've come a long way from where you started. So for me, progress over perfection any day.
I love that. And celebrate all of those little steps. Briefly, Taiwo, what about for you? Your biggest lesson?
Biggest for me is that we are all connected. One small virus in China has spread across the world. And if there's still a single virus anywhere in the world, then all of us are not safe. The same way that if the poor person cannot sleep because they're hungry, then the rich person cannot sleep as well because the poor people are awake. It means that we need to help ourselves, bring everybody together to all have prosperity.
Right, thank you so much for that. I think for me, the biggest lesson that I've learned is that something good can always come out of a difficult situation. And I've seen that not just in my life, but in the lives of many people that I've interviewed throughout this year. Well, that's all that we have for today. 2020 may be cancelled, as many people would call it, but that doesn't mean that you can't plan for a better future. My takeaway from today's show is that if there's anything that we can learn out of the pandemic, is that we should be ready for the unexpected, to be flexible and to adapt. I definitely will keep that in mind as we walk into 2021. I do hope you too were able to pick a few tips here and there as you plan for your way to the new year. A huge thank you to our guests who showed up today and offered their expertise. Even as our holiday mood set in, don't forget to adhere to simple safety guidelines that could save countless lives. Wear a mask while out in public, sanitize frequently, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. Please do consult a physician or visit a healthcare facility near you should you experience any COVID symptoms. Once again, thanks for watching, and a shout out to those who watch from our partner stations: Times Television and Capital FM in Malawi, Capital FM in Kenya, NBS Television in Uganda, Bush Radio in South Africa, Splash FM in Nigeria, YFM in Ghana, QTV in Gambia, and Sky Communications in Liberia. My name is Maya Hayakawa. This is our last show for 2020. So on behalf of our team here, happy holidays, everyone. Stay safe and see you in 2021.